Vietnamese people are rude.
Hey, how you doing?
Can you shut the f up?
Have a negative of these foreign countries. We're 4 times bigger GDP than Vietnam. Women cannot be strong and independent. Today, we will be talking about the misconceptions, stereotypes, and myths of Vietnamese culture and norms, which will allow you to have a better understanding of what used to be accepted 70 years ago, but now we will talk about the nuances of the current times, and that's the video we're going to talk about today. Hello, my name is Ken Duong, international and business immigration lawyer with over 15 years of experience helping individuals, companies to invest, retire, live, and work in Vietnam. And I myself have been living here for over 10 years. Vietnamese people are rude. This stereotype is not true for the most part. In general, there are rude people all over the world, but Vietnamese are not one of them. The West may think that Vietnamese are rude because they don't say hello, thank you, and how are you? And for this reason, it's really a misunderstanding of cultural norms and communication styles. Vietnam has a history of hierarchical social structures, which would mean that they will actually be more polite towards people who have higher authority or perceived social status over others. But then, of course, this can be misconstrued that you're only really nice and polite to people who are actually have something to give you or some advantage to you. For example, if you go into a convenience store in the West, the clerk will say, hello, how are you, and how can I help you?
Hey, how you doing?
Can you shut the f up?
Whereas you come into Vietnam in a convenience store, the clerk will actually still say hello, welcome to GS25, Family Mart, or something. But then the actual customer, they will say something like, give me a pack of batteries. They'll pay and then they'll go and they won't even say thank you at all, because it's perceived that the customer is of higher status than the clerk or the employee. Therefore, they're not needing to show deference or politeness to that person. And that can be misunderstood as rudeness. This distinction might be considered rudeness. However, if those two people, instead of the customer and the clerk, were between a child or a student and the parents, the teacher, the boss, or somebody of authority, then you'll definitely see a different interaction. And if they interacted the same way, it would be considered rude to the person with the higher authority. So therefore, when you don't hear thank you or you don't hear hello, please don't take it as rudeness, because that is a part of the culture and the norms of Vietnam. So you cannot get a job in Vietnam if you do not speak Vietnamese. This is a myth that stems from years of Vietnam being an agricultural or agrarian society. But now, with the foreign direct investment, multinational corporations, and many foreign companies opening in Vietnam, servicing a particular market, especially in English. So if you only speak English or French or even Italian, you can still find a job in Vietnam servicing those particular industries, especially in technology, in hospitality, even in some manufacturing jobs, and especially for different professional services that target towards foreign companies investing into Vietnam. So if you want to know how to get a job in Vietnam, make sure that you click on our video in the right-hand corner in order to watch a video on how to find a job in Vietnam. So it brings me to the third lie in Vietnam is poor. Vietnam being poor is a misconception that people have of Vietnam, not taking into the account of the astronomical economic growth since 1995. In 1995, Vietnam and US opened diplomatic relations and normalization, which allowed for Vietnam's growth and opening to the world and many of their policies to attract foreign direct investment, local growth, and also coming out to the world of international expansion. In 1995, Vietnam's GDP was only $20 billion.
As compared to Thailand, which was 169 billion, Malaysia 88 billion, and Singapore was 87 billion.
So those countries were 4 times bigger GDP than Vietnam. In 2010, Vietnam's GDP grew by 700% to $147 billion.
As opposed to Thailand, Malaysia, and Singapore respectively were 341 billion, 255 billion, and $239 billion.
Which means that the GDP gap was starting to shrink. And in 2022, Vietnam's GDP finally overcame Malaysia. So Vietnam had 408 billion in GDP.
Nice.
While Malaysia was only 406 billion in GDP. Nevertheless, Thailand was still faster than Vietnam with 496 billion, and Singapore was 466 billion.
Although there's a long ways to go for Vietnam to pass Thailand's GDP, which is expected to be in 2035. However, Vietnam has a lot of foreign direct investment, a lot of eyes on them, so we can definitely see that happening, but we will see what happens. In general, Vietnam exhibited all this economic GDP growth throughout the years due to its liberalization of policies, signing many international free trade agreements and multilateral trade agreements around the world, and also building better diplomatic relationships with countries like the United States, blocs such as ASEAN, and also with the EU. So therefore, they're able to cover globally all the international trade, which has led to the investments of large companies like Apple, Intel, Samsung, and of course the technology giants as well, such as Facebook, Google, Amazon, and many other players as well. So with that, Vietnam will continue to grow, and we are extremely positive of Vietnam's economic growth and will no longer be considered or perceived as a poor country. That leads to lie number 4, that Vietnam does not want foreigners to live here. So we really had to include this misconception, which was about 50 years ago. If you look at the current demographics in Vietnam, 70% of the population are under 30 years old, which means that they grew up watching US movies, foreign movies, YouTube, Facebook, and many of the other global content. So they don't have a negative or misconceptions of these foreign countries. These diplomatic ties were already made between these multinational companies. So therefore, as foreigners and also expats living in Vietnam, it's extremely very common for the local Vietnamese here. So Vietnam has a very open and progressive stance towards foreigners coming into Vietnam. For example, there's a misconception that Vietnam is not open because it does not have a retirement visa. However, the US and France do not have retirement visas either.
Well, duh.
That doesn't mean that they do not want foreigners. They are very specific to types of immigration, such as employment-based, investment-based, and not purely leisure immigration. For instance, it's actually very easy to get a work permit or a TRC in Vietnam based on working for a company or an investor visa. With roughly about $50,000, you can get a 1-year renewable investor visa. Another example is Vietnam's foreign direct investment in 2022 was $22.4 billion, and for 2023, it's expected to be $38 billion. Thus, you can see the increase of foreign direct investment every single year, and it will continue to grow, which will continue to grow the GDP of Vietnam. Although there are no official numbers yet, but the Ministry of Labor has put out since April 2021, there are roughly 101,550 foreigners working on a permanent basis in Vietnam. If Vietnam did not want foreigners, then they wouldn't make it so easy to get a TRC based on marriage, very simple tourist visas, and also other investor visas as well. So people can come here and really enjoy the culture, the people, the foods of Vietnam. Even expats who are looking to live, work, or invest into Vietnam, either starting a company, educational opportunities, or just coming here to retire, should definitely look into many opportunities of how easy it is to come and live in Vietnam. So whether you are coming to Vietnam to live long-term, short-term, or just traveling or opening up a company, then we can definitely help you with the 90-day multiple entry visa, with the marriage visa or the spousal visa, investor visa, and many other options as well. So make sure that you contact us to give you a detailed plan for entering and living in Vietnam. Vietnamese workers only care about salary. This may be true for some of the factory workers or agricultural workers, but Vietnam is 40% industrial and 60% agrarian. So for the office workers that you're hiring, they are not only looking at salary, they're looking for the total benefits package that includes health and social insurance, transportation, lunch allowance, and many of the other fringe benefits that helps the employee have a better work-life balance and enjoy their job satisfaction. So if you plan to start a company or manage part of a company, then you definitely want to take into account all of these different benefits and options and compensation structures that will help you create skilled workforce, passionate employees, and also create a positive work environment. Which leads us to lie number 6. Healthcare is bad in Vietnam. Although we admit that the public hospitals or healthcare system is underfunded, but if you look at the private healthcare systems, they are doing extremely well, provide amazing service and at a reasonable price, and of course they take insurance as well. So we made a whole video about the healthcare system in Vietnam. So click on the right-hand corner to watch that video to get step-by-step information about the healthcare system and how good it is and it's growing in the future. So Vietnam is not a safe country. In fact, Vietnam is safer than the United States based on the Global Peace Index, which ranks Vietnam 41 out of 163 countries, whereas the US is ranked 141st. Vietnam has very low crime rates, outlaws guns, and very, very low petty crime as well, with the exception of purse snatching or motorbike snatching and very, very small pickpocketing. Aside from that, Vietnam is an extremely safe country. You cannot buy real estate in Vietnam as a foreigner. That is only true for land. Just similar to the Vietnamese are only allowed to have land use rights, but not full ownership. But that's also changing as well for foreigners. So in 2017, the law allowed for foreigners to buy what is called properties attached to the land, such as apartments, condos, and various projects that allow for foreigners to have a 50-year leasehold on the property. That's also possibly changing as well with the new real estate environment where foreigners might be able to own land in the future. So if you want a step-by-step guide on how to purchase real estate in Vietnam, click on the right-hand corner and we have many videos that will give you a guide on how to buy property in Vietnam. But if you are a Vietnamese overseas, you have very special exceptions that you can get a Vietnamese passport and then also get a Vietnamese national ID that will allow you the full bundle of rights of owning property in Vietnam, including land. So we've done over 200 Vietnamese passports and more citizenship. So if you're looking to get your Vietnamese citizenship, contact us, email us, or call us, and we'll be glad to help you. Vietnam culture is an exact copy of the Chinese culture. Well, if you were colonized for over 1,000 years by the Chinese in Vietnam, then you would have some of the cultural similarities. But Vietnam also has developed many of its own different identities and cultures as well. For example, the Hung Kings Festival, which is a celebration of Vietnam's own culture, independence, and also a celebration of its vibrant culture aside from China and other influences. Nevertheless, Vietnam was also influenced by the French and the Portuguese. For example, the Vietnamese alphabet is based on the Latin alphabet, which was initiated by the Portuguese during their discoveries. Also, the French left many of the amazing cuisines, such as baguettes and coffees. And a fun fact, the Vietnamese bureaucracy system was actually based on the French model. In addition to the Chinese and French influences in Vietnam, they also have influences from Thai, Cham, and the Khmer cultures as well, due to the strategic location of Indochina and also the bordering nations, which have caused a big influence into Vietnam. So while the Chinese culture had an influence on Vietnamese culture, but it is not the only one. Vietnamese culture is rich, diverse due to the melting pots of different cultures around the world. Vietnamese women are submissive.
What?
There's a strong stereotype that in general, Vietnamese women are submissive. And of course, there are some in society, but in general, that is not true. So you should not mistaken the modesty and deference in the family circle to mean that a woman cannot be strong and independent in the workplace. In fact, 38% of business owners in Vietnam are women, as opposed to the global average of only 25%. And many women play very strong leadership roles in their companies and their businesses as well. The difference between the family and the workplace is that the family has traditionally clearly defined roles. However, in the workplace, a woman can be strong, independent, and exhibit leadership skills, and then also carry back home the family life and exhibit those traditional values as well. Therefore, the stereotype of Vietnamese women being submissive is inaccurate and outdated. Most women in Vietnam now are capable, independent, and very strong, thus contributing very significantly to the expansion and development of Vietnamese society and the world as a whole. So I hope that you like this video. Let us know in the comments below what you think, if the myths are true or the lies are true or not, and if you have other myths that you want to dispel as well. As always, thank you very much for watching this video, and I'll see you on the next one.